Above ground, it looks like nothing at all. A quiet suburban street. Ordinary houses, a few parked bicycles, the kind of neighborhood you'd drive through without a single thought crossing your mind. 60 meters beneath that same street, something else entirely is waiting in the dark. A row of concrete pillars, each one taller than a 5-story building, standing in perfect formation across a cavern so vast it's been compared more than once to the inside of a European cathedral. Nobody worships here. Nobody was ever meant to see it, honestly. It was never built to be beautiful. It was built to save an entire region from drowning. This is one of the largest underground structures on Earth, and until fairly recently, almost nobody outside Japan had ever heard of it. To understand why something like this exists, you first have to understand the very ordinary problem it was built to solve. North of Tokyo, in a low-lying stretch of Saitama Prefecture, a network of smaller rivers winds through one of the most densely populated regions in the world. For generations, those rivers did what rivers under enough pressure eventually do. During major storms and typhoons, they overflowed, sending floodwater directly into homes, streets, and businesses that had nowhere else for that water to go. This wasn't a rare freak occurrence. It was a recurring, predictable threat baked into the geography of the region itself. And in a country that experiences typhoons virtually every year, a recurring flood risk isn't something you simply learn to live with. It's a problem you eventually decide to solve, permanently, no matter how enormous the solution needs to be.
So Japan built one of the most ambitious flood control projects in its history, and it built almost the entire thing where nobody would ever have to look at it. The basic idea, stripped down to its simplest form, is almost elegant in its directness. When several smaller rivers threaten to overflow at once, the system intercepts that rising floodwater before it can reach the surface streets above. It channels that water into a massive underground tunnel network, moves it toward a single central point, and eventually pumps it into the region's largest, most flood-resistant river, one capable of safely carrying that extra volume out and away from the city. On paper, that's a fairly straightforward engineering concept: underground, redirect, discharge. In practice, building something capable of doing that at the scale this region actually required meant constructing an underground system genuinely difficult to compare to almost anything else on the planet. The most visually extraordinary part of the entire system is a single massive chamber, a surge tank essentially, designed to temporarily hold enormous volumes of floodwater before it's pumped onward. And because that chamber needed to be structurally capable of supporting the tremendous weight of the ground and city above it, engineers filled it with dozens of massive concrete pillars, evenly spaced, each one rising far overhead into the darkness. The effect, when you actually stand inside it, is almost impossible to reconcile with its actual purpose. Rows of towering pillars, disappearing into shadow, in a space so silent and enormous that visitors instinctively lower their voices, the same way people do inside a cathedral, without ever being told to.
It's easy to forget, standing there, that you're not looking at a monument. You're looking at plumbing, on a scale most engineers spend their entire careers never getting the chance to build. Construction on the full system stretched across more than a decade, an enormous, patient undertaking that unfolded almost entirely underground, invisible to the people living directly above it the entire time. Houses stayed put, streets stayed ordinary. Daily life above ground barely changed at all, while 60 meters below, one of the most ambitious pieces of infrastructure in the country's history slowly took shape in the dark. When the system finally became operational, its job wasn't to look impressive. Its job was to disappear into the background of daily life, only revealing what it actually does during the exact moments when the region needed it most. Picture the system doing its actual work, because that moment looks nothing like the quiet, empty chamber most images show. A typhoon approaches. Rain intensifies for hours, then days. The smaller rivers that have flooded this region for generations begin rising toward the same dangerous levels they always have. But this time, before that water can spill into homes and streets, it's pulled downward instead, funneled through underground tunnels into that massive chamber. Powerful pumps, housed in an adjacent facility, roar into action, moving enormous volumes of water out of the tank and into the larger river built to handle it. Somewhere above, on an ordinary street, rain is falling exactly like every other storm always has. Nobody up there sees any of this happening. That's precisely the point. If the system does its job correctly, the entire event ends the same way. Nothing happens. No flooded homes.
No emergency evacuations, no damage headlines the next morning, just an unremarkable, forgettable storm passing through a neighborhood that never realized how close it may have come to a very different outcome. That's a strange kind of success to build something this enormous around, an achievement measured entirely by the disasters that quietly never occurred, by mornings that stayed completely ordinary, specifically because something extraordinary happened invisibly underneath them the night before. It also says something worth sitting with about how a country decides to spend enormous resources on a problem most of its own citizens will never personally witness being solved. There's no ribbon-cutting moment that captures what this structure does, no single dramatic before and after image, just an accumulation, year after storm season, of flooding that simply didn't happen because 60 meters underground, an enormous cathedral-like machine quietly did exactly what it was built to do. In recent years, that hidden structure has slowly become visible in a different way. Photographs of its towering pillars have circulated widely, drawing comparisons to ancient architecture, attracting photographers, filmmakers, and curious visitors who come specifically to stand inside a space most people assumed only existed in fantasy or fiction. Limited public tours now let ordinary visitors walk through the same cavern that, during the right storm, fills with water most of them will never actually witness. It's a strange kind of landmark, famous in certain circles, specifically for what it prevents rather than for anything it actively creates, beautiful almost by accident, in service of a purpose that has nothing to do with beauty at all.
The next time you're walking down an ordinary street, anywhere at all, it might be worth remembering that infrastructure like this exists quietly beneath entire regions of the world, built by people who understood that the best possible outcome for their life's work was for almost nobody to ever notice it was there. Not because it failed, because every single time it mattered, it worked exactly as intended, 60 meters below an ordinary street that never had any idea how close it came to being anything other than ordinary at all.